What if the person who could save everything you've ever built is someone whose name you've never even learned, even though you've seen them 1,000 times? This is the true story of a billionaire who watched $50 billion vanish in one night, and the black woman in a maid's uniform who did the impossible in 47 seconds, a woman the world had erased, a man too arrogant to look down, and one midnight moment that stripped away everything fake to reveal what was real. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll never see service workers the same way again. You'll understand that the people we dismiss might be the very ones holding our survival in their hands. And you might just realize that someone you're ignoring right now, someone you walk past, someone you don't really see, might be your only hope when everything falls apart. This is a story about what happens when power meets humility, about invisible heroes and the cost of blindness, about the kind of salvation that only comes when you finally open your eyes. Let me take you back to that midnight in Manhattan when a king fell and a ghost became real. Lawrence Matos stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 47th floor corner office. Manhattan spread beneath him like a kingdom of light. At midnight, the city still pulsed with ambition, and he felt a deep kinship with it, relentless, hungry, never sleeping. In 9 hours, he would sign the papers that would make him the youngest person in American history to control a major bank. Sterling Financial would be his, and with it, a legacy that would outlive him by generations. He'd sent everyone home hours ago. His team had wanted to celebrate, pop champagne, make toasts to the golden boy who'd turned a single algorithm into a $50 billion empire in just 12 years. But Lawrence preferred solitude to spectacle. Celebration felt like vulnerability, and vulnerability was something he'd systematically eliminated from his life, the same way he eliminated underperforming assets from his portfolio. The Bloomberg terminal on his desk painted his face in shifting green light as numbers scrolled past futures, derivatives, currency fluctuations in markets that wouldn't open for hours. He'd trained himself to read them like poetry, to see patterns where others saw chaos. It was this gift, this almost supernatural ability to perceive what others missed, that had built Matos Capital into a titan. That, and his willingness to do what softer men couldn't, to cut, to push, to step over anyone who couldn't keep pace. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Webb, his chief operating officer. "History tomorrow, boss. You've earned this." Lawrence smiled slightly. Marcus understood. 8 years together, and Marcus had never once questioned a decision, never once asked for credit he hadn't earned. Loyalty like that was rare, valuable. Lawrence returned to his desk, pulling up the final sterling documents for one more review. Perfection wasn't achieved by assumption. It was achieved by obsessive attention to detail, by refusing to trust anyone else to catch what you might catch yourself. He'd learned that early. When you came from nothing, really nothing, the kind of poverty that made you invisible to people who mattered, you learned that the only person you could truly count on was yourself. At 12:15 a.m., he heard the familiar sound of wheels on marble, the cleaning cart, the night shift janitor making her rounds. He didn't look up. He never looked up. She'd been coming at this exact time. For how long had it been? A year? 2? He genuinely didn't know. The cleaning staff was handled by facilities management, and Lawrence had never bothered to learn their names or schedules. They were part of the building's infrastructure, like the HVAC system or the security cameras, necessary, but not notable. Kayla Bradley pushed her cart through the heavy glass door of the executive suite, her movements practiced and nearly silent. She wore the standard uniform black dress, white apron, her hair pulled back beneath a simple cap. In her hands were the tools of invisibility, microfiber cloths, spray bottles, a vacuum with wheels that glided like whispers. She'd perfected the art of cleaning around important people without disturbing their important thoughts. It was a kind of choreography, really. Anticipate where they'll move, be there before they need you gone, exist in the spaces between their attention. She'd been doing this for 2 years, 730 nights of arriving at 12:15 a.m. to clean the executive floor of Matos Capital. 730 nights of moving through Lawrence Matos's office, while he worked through her presence as if she were air. She knew his patterns better than he knew them himself. The way he tilted his head when he was concentrating, the specific sound his chair made when he leaned back, satisfied with the solution. The fact that he took his coffee black and left exactly half an inch in the cup, which he'd absently set on the corner of his desk, where she'd learned to avoid knocking it over. Lawrence heard the soft spray of cleaner on glass, the gentle swipe of cloth on his conference table. Background noise. White noise. He was deep in Section 47 of the merger agreement when his email pinged. A message from his lead attorney. Final SEC approval came through. We're clear for signing. Congratulations, Lawrence. You've done the impossible. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The impossible, yes. That's what they'd all said when he'd started Matos Capital in a studio apartment in Queens with nothing but a laptop and an idea. Impossible for someone like him. Someone with no connections, no family money, no safety net. He'd proven them all wrong by becoming exactly what they said he couldn't be: necessary, powerful, too important to ignore. At 12:47 a.m., Lawrence's world ended. Every screen in his office flashed blood red simultaneously. His Bloomberg terminal, his trading monitors, his laptop, even his phone, all of them seized by the same crimson warning. A skull icon materialized, stark white against the red, and beneath it, words that made his blood freeze: system vulnerable. You have been erased. The invisible hand. Lawrence's fingers flew to his keyboard. Locked. He tried his backup authentication. Denied. Biometric scanner. Error. His phone was dead, not powered off, but completely unresponsive, as if it had been wiped clean. He watched, paralyzed, as his Bloomberg terminal began displaying something impossible. His accounts were draining. Not slowly, not subtly, but in massive, catastrophic transfers happening in real time. 50 million gone. 200 million. A billion. The numbers scrolled past faster than he could process them. He lunged for his desk phone. Dead. Tried to access his emergency protocols. Every system was locked behind authentication that no longer recognized him. He was watching his entire empire vanish, and he was completely, utterly powerless to stop it. Lawrence grabbed his laptop, tried manually rebooting, tried every backdoor access he'd ever created. Nothing. The red screen mocked him with its skull and its message. You have been erased. 5 billion gone now. 10. The markets would open in hours, and when they did, the news would break: Matos Capital had been destroyed, hacked, compromised. His clients' money, his employees' futures, his own legacy, all of it, draining away like water through his fingers. He tried to think, to strategize, to find the angle, the solution, the move that would save him, but there was nothing. No move, no angle. He was locked out of his own life, watching it disappear in real time, and for the first time since he was a child, Lawrence Matos felt what it meant to be truly helpless. 20 billion, 30, 40. His hands were shaking. His breath came in short gasps. The man who'd built an empire on control had absolutely none. The man who'd made his fortune seeing what others missed was blind. The Sterling acquisition would collapse. His company would be bankrupt by sunrise. Criminal investigations would follow. Everything he'd built, everything he'd become, evaporating before his eyes while he sat paralyzed in his leather chair, master of nothing. Lawrence collapsed forward, his head in his hands, and for the first time in 12 years, he felt tears burning behind his eyes, not of sadness, of rage, of shame, of the particular agony that comes when you realize you're not special after all, not immune, not untouchable, just human, just vulnerable, just erased. Behind him, reflected in the dark glass of his windows, Kayla Bradley stood motionless beside her cleaning cart, her eyes on the red screens, her expression unreadable. She'd been standing there for 45 seconds, watching, seeing what he couldn't see, understanding what he couldn't understand. She took one step forward, then another, and Lawrence Matos, who had never once looked at the woman who'd cleaned his office for 730 nights, was about to learn her name. Kayla's voice cut through the silence like a blade through water, soft but precise. Oh God, it's a Cerberus variant. Lawrence's head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. He stared at her, really looked at her for the first time in 2 years, his eyes wild with desperation and confusion. What did you say? She stood 3 feet from his desk, her hands still gripping a microfiber cloth, her eyes locked on the crimson screens displaying his destruction. "The attack signature," she said quietly, stepping closer. "Triple encrypted backdoor, polymorphic code structure. The skull icon, it's a Cerberus variant, military-grade ransomware. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing." Lawrence's mind stuttered. The words coming from her mouth made no sense in the context of her uniform, her cart, her invisibility. Who are you? "Someone who might be able to stop this," Kayla said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But I need you to trust me completely, and I need your admin credentials. All of them, right now. Trust." The word hung in the air like smoke. Lawrence looked at this woman he'd never truly seen, wearing a maid's uniform and speaking in technical language that maybe 5 people in the world could understand. Every instinct he'd honed over 12 years screamed at him, "This is insane. This is impossible. This is a trap." But those same instincts had just watched $50 billion drain away without a single solution. His expertise had failed. His systems had failed. His control had been an illusion. 45 billion now. The clock was ticking. "If I give you access and you're part of this," he started. "Then you've already lost everything," Kayla interrupted, her eyes meeting his with startling intensity. "But if I'm not, and you don't let me try, you lose it anyway. You have nothing left to protect, Mr. Matos. You only have something to save." The truth of it hit him like a fist. He had nothing, no leverage, no options, no pride worth preserving. Just a choice: die clinging to control, or surrender it to the impossible. Lawrence took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "What do you need?" Kayla moved around his desk with sudden purpose, her cleaning uniform incongruous against the crisis unfolding on the screens. "Your master admin password, your secondary authentication codes, and your complete silence while I work." He gave her everything. Passwords he'd never spoken aloud, access he'd never shared, the keys to his entire kingdom handed to a woman whose name he still didn't know. She positioned herself at his keyboard, her fingers hovering for just a moment before they began to move. And then Lawrence Matos witnessed something that shattered every assumption he'd built his life upon. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with a speed and precision that seemed inhuman. Lines of code cascaded down the screen faster than he could track. She wasn't typing, she was conducting, orchestrating a symphony of commands that rewrote reality in real time. She opened terminal windows he didn't know existed, accessed backdoors he'd never created, deployed countermeasures that appeared to materialize from nothing. "They're using a triple-layer exploit," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Primary attack vector through your email server, secondary through the market feed integration, tertiary through..." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "Through your internal update system. That's how they got root access." Lawrence watched, comprehension dawning like a cold sunrise. As she began what looked like digital surgery, she isolated sections of his network, quarantining the infection while simultaneously tracing its origin. Her movements were economical, expert, the work of someone who'd done this before under pressure that made billions look trivial. "I'm building a sandbox," she explained, her voice clinical now, distant. "Isolating the malware so I can analyze its command structure without letting it execute the final transfers. But I need to do this before," she glanced at the clock, "before 1:34 a.m. That's when the primary transfer protocol engages. 7 minutes, they had 7 minutes. Kayla's hands never stopped moving. She was attacking the attack, using its own architecture against it, finding the fatal flaw that every system had if you knew where to look. "They assumed singular admin control," she said. "They didn't account for someone with NSA-level access, creating a parallel authentication chain." "NSA," Lawrence whispered. "Not now." Her focus was absolute. She opened what looked like an air-gapped backup system drives Lawrence had created years ago and forgotten about. Offline storage that couldn't be touched by any networked attack. She began pulling his core systems from there, restoring the foundation while the ransomware chewed through its own tail in the sandbox she'd built. The numbers on his Bloomberg terminal stopped falling, froze, then began reversing. At 1:33 a.m. and 13 seconds, Kayla's fingers executed a final sequence. The red screens flickered, once, twice. then dissolved into normal operations, as if they'd never been corrupted at all. The skull vanished. The warning disappeared. His systems began a full restoration protocol, pulling clean data from backups and rebuilding everything the attack had tried to destroy. 47 seconds before the final transfer would have executed, Kayla had stopped it completely. She leaned back in his chair, her hands finally still, and exhaled a breath that seemed to carry the weight of years. The immediate threat is neutralized. Your systems are restoring. You'll need to run full security audits, change every credential, and rebuild your authentication infrastructure, but the money's safe. Your company's safe. Lawrence stared at her, his mind trying to process what he'd just witnessed. Who are you? Kayla stood, suddenly looking exhausted, and for the first time he saw her. The intelligence in her eyes, the weight of something broken behind them, the careful way she held herself, like someone who'd learned to make herself small. My name is Kayla Bradley, she said quietly. I used to be Kayla Chen Bradley. 6 years ago, I worked for the NSA as a Level 5 cyberwarfare specialist. I was the youngest person ever to achieve that clearance. Used to be, Lawrence repeated, the words heavy. I was framed for leaking classified intelligence, she continued, her voice flat, reciting facts instead of feeling them. A scandal I didn't commit but could never prove I was innocent of. They didn't charge me insufficient evidence, but they didn't clear me either. My career ended, my marriage ended, my life ended. So I disappeared into work where nobody asks questions and nobody looks too closely. I've been cleaning your office for 2 years, Mr. Matos. 730 nights. And in that time, I've watched you build something impressive while never once seeing the security vulnerabilities you were creating. The shame hit Lawrence like a physical blow. You've been here for 2 years, and I never men like you don't see women like me, Kayla said, not unkindly, just stating a fact. Even now, you're shocked that I can think, that I can do more than push a vacuum. I'm invisible because people like you need me to be, and I've been invisible because I needed to disappear. We were both getting what we wanted. Lawrence opened his mouth, closed it. Every response felt inadequate. Every apology felt obscene. Kayla turned back to the screens, her professional mask sliding back into place. But there's something you need to know. This wasn't just a ransomware attack. She pulled up logs, traced digital fingerprints, and showed him evidence that made his blood freeze. The backdoors were created months ago. The access points were established during routine system updates. Someone with internal credentials laid the groundwork for this long before tonight. That's impossible, Lawrence said. My team is. Look at the authentication logs. Kayla's voice was gentle, like a surgeon delivering bad news. These entries were made using credentials that belong to someone with root access to your infrastructure. Someone you trust absolutely. Lawrence leaned over her shoulder, reading the evidence she'd uncovered. The timestamps, the credential signatures, the careful, methodical preparation that had made tonight's attack possible. And there, buried in the metadata, was a name that made his world tilt on its axis. Marcus Webb, his COO, his right hand, his trusted partner of 8 years, the man who'd texted him congratulations just an hour ago. No, Lawrence breathed. Marcus would never. Kayla traced the money flow, showing him shell companies, offshore accounts, connections that led to Richard Sterling, the very man Lawrence was supposed to acquire in 8 hours. The conspiracy revealed itself in data that couldn't lie. Marcus and Richard had planned this together. Destroy Lawrence, seize the company in the chaos, position Marcus as the savior who completes the Sterling acquisition under his own control. He was never loyal to you, Kayla said quietly. He was just waiting for the right moment to take what you'd never give him. Lawrence sank into his chair, the betrayal cutting deeper than the attack itself. He'd trusted Marcus, valued him, never once suspected that the man he saw every day had been planning his destruction. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been blind to the person who could save him, and equally blind to the one who wanted to destroy him. Why? He whispered. Why would you help me? After everything, after being invisible, after Kayla looked at him with eyes that had seen too much and forgiven more. Because 2 years ago, I watched you donate $10 million anonymously to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. You didn't do it for publicity. You did it because you remembered being one. And I thought maybe there's something in there worth saving. Maybe you just need someone to actually see you, the way I needed someone to see me." She paused, then added, "And because Marcus Webb once saw me crying in the break room when I got the news about my sister's diagnosis. He looked at me with such contempt, like my pain was offensive to him. Some people deserve second chances, Mr. Matos. And some people deserve exactly what's coming to them." Lawrence stared at Marcus Webb's name in the authentication logs, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were showing him. 8 years. 8 years of building this company together, of late-night strategizing, of Marcus standing beside him through hostile takeovers and market crashes, and the brutal climb to the top. 8 years of trust that now looked like 8 years of being played. "There has to be another explanation," Lawrence said, but his voice lacked conviction. Someone could have stolen his credentials, spoofed his access. Marcus wouldn't. Kayla pulled up another window, her movements gentle, as if she understood she was dismantling someone's entire worldview. "Look at the pattern. These aren't isolated breaches. This is systematic preparation over 6 months. Updates scheduled during times when Marcus personally oversaw system maintenance. Backdoors created during security patches he personally approved. And here, she highlighted a series of financial transactions. Shell companies established 3 months ago, offshore accounts, money flowing between Marcus's hidden holdings and entities controlled by Sterling Financial." She opened an email archive, and Lawrence felt his stomach drop. Messages between Marcus and Richard Sterling, carefully encrypted but not carefully enough. Plans discussed in corporate euphemisms that barely disguise their intent. References to the transition and the restructure and Lawrence's exit strategy. The final email, sent yesterday, was chillingly brief. "Tomorrow night, execute the protocol. By sunrise, it's ours. They were going to destroy you, blame you for fraud, and position Marcus as the hero who saved the company in crisis," Kayla explained. "Then Marcus would complete the Sterling acquisition, but now as the head of Matos Capital, merging the companies under his control, you'd be ruined. They'd be kings." Lawrence's hands clenched into fists. The betrayal was almost worse than the attack itself. He'd valued Marcus, promoted him, trusted him with access to everything. And the entire time Marcus had been building the infrastructure of his destruction. "I made him COO. I gave him equity. You gave him power, but never gave him credit," Kayla said quietly. "I've watched you for 2 years, remember? I've seen how you operate. Marcus executes brilliant strategies, and you announce them as your own. He builds the architecture, and you get the headlines. I'm not saying he's right, what he's doing is monstrous, but I am saying you didn't see him any more than you saw me." The truth of it stung because it was accurate. Lawrence had thought of Marcus as an extension of himself, a tool that executed his vision. Valuable, yes. Trusted, yes. But seen, truly valued as a separate person with his own ambitions and needs, no. He'd made Marcus invisible in a different way, and that invisibility had curdled into rage. "What do we do?" Lawrence asked, and the question itself marked a transformation. The old Lawrence would have said, "What do I do?" Now, for the first time, he understood he needed someone else. Kayla leaned back, her mind clearly working through scenarios. "We need irrefutable proof that will hold up in court. Right now, we have evidence, but a good lawyer could argue the credentials were stolen, the communications were fabricated. We need Marcus to reveal himself." "How?" A slight smile touched Kayla's lips, and Lawrence saw the ghost of who she'd been before the scandal: confident, brilliant, dangerous in the best way. "We give him exactly what he wants. We let him think he's won." Over the next hour, they constructed a trap with the precision of watchmakers building a time bomb. Lawrence would call Marcus, broken and desperate, begging him to come save the company. Meanwhile, Kayla would plant digital bait, a false vulnerability in the restored systems that would require Marcus to access them one more time using his hidden backdoor. That access, documented in real time by monitoring software Kayla installed, would be undeniable proof. "There's one more thing I need to do," Kayla said, pulling out a phone Lawrence hadn't seen before. "I need to make a call to someone I haven't spoken to in 6 years." She stepped away, her voice low, and Lawrence heard fragments. Agent Morrison. Yes, it's me. I know. But listen, Matos Capital, Federal Cyberterrorism Statute. I need you to trust me one more time. When she returned, her face was pale but determined. The FBI is mobilizing a team. They'll be here by 5 a.m. We just need to keep Marcus talking until they arrive. At 4 a.m., Lawrence made the call. His hand shook as he dialed Marcus's personal cell, and he realized the tremor wasn't entirely acting. Marcus, he said, his voice cracking with genuine emotion. Thank God you answered. I need you here. Now. Lawrence? What's wrong? You sound… Everything's wrong. The attack, Marcus. It's worse than I thought. I'm locked out of core systems. The money, the accounts, the Sterling acquisition, it's all falling apart. I can't stop it. He let desperation bleed through every word. I need you. Please. Don't tell anyone else. If this leaks before we can contain it, I'm coming, Marcus said, and Lawrence could hear the barely concealed excitement beneath the concern. 20 minutes. Don't do anything until I get there. Kayla had been listening, and she nodded approval. Well done. Now we wait. They spent those 20 minutes in tense silence. Kayla monitored her systems, ensuring the bait was in place. Lawrence stood at his windows, watching the city begin its slow transition from night to dawn, and wondered how many other betrayals he'd been blind to. How many people had he walked past, used, dismissed? How many Marcus Webbs had he created? At 4:47 a.m., Marcus Webb strode through the executive suite doors, his face arranged in an expression of deep concern. He wore a suit despite the hour, looking every inch the loyal deputy rushing to save his commander. Lawrence, I came as fast as I could. Show me what's happening. Lawrence turned from the windows, and he let Marcus see the broken man he'd become. It's gone, Marcus. Everything. 50 billion in assets, just vanished. I watched it drain away, and I couldn't stop it. His voice broke. I can't do this alone. I need you to take over. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Triumph, quickly masked. Of course. We'll get through this together. You're not alone. He moved to the computer, and Lawrence saw his fingers twitch toward the keyboard before he stopped himself. Walk me through what happened. Lawrence recited the attack, watching Marcus's face. The man played his part perfectly. Shock, anger, determination, but Lawrence saw it now. The performance beneath the performance. The way Marcus's eyes gleamed when Lawrence described his helplessness. The slight upward curve of his lips when Lawrence talked about losing everything. This is sophisticated, Marcus said, leaning closer to the screens. Military grade. We'll need to. He paused, his eyes narrowing. Wait, some of the systems are back online. How did you? She did, Lawrence said quietly. Kayla Bradley stepped out from behind the conference room door where she'd been hidden. She'd removed her cleaning uniform's apron, standing now in just the simple black dress, and there was nothing subservient in her posture. She looked like what she was, a warrior stepping onto a battlefield. Marcus's face went white, then red. What is the cleaning lady doing here? She's not a cleaning lady, Lawrence said, standing tall for the first time in hours. Her name is Kayla Chen Bradley, and she's the person who just caught you. The mask shattered. Marcus's expression twisted from shocked confusion to pure, incandescent rage. How did you? He spun on Kayla. You're nobody. You're nothing. You clean floors. I stopped your attack in 47 seconds, Kayla said calmly. I traced it back to your credentials, your shell companies, your partnership with Sterling. I've documented every backdoor you created, every communication you sent, every dollar you planned to steal, and in about 3 minutes, the FBI is going to walk through that door with warrants for your arrest. Marcus's breath came in short gasps. His eyes darted between them, looking for an exit, a weapon, any kind of leverage. You can't prove anything. You think anyone will believe that Lawrence Matos needed rescue from a maid? That I would? We have your access logs from 17 minutes ago, Kayla interrupted. When you couldn't resist checking whether the attack had succeeded, you used your hidden backdoor to query the system status. That access, time-stamped and authenticated, proves you had unauthorized penetration tools installed in Matos Capital's infrastructure. You walked right into the trap, Lawrence added. And for the first time tonight, he felt something like power returning. Not the old power, this was different, earned through humility rather than dominance. Marcus's rage finally erupted. You want to know why I did it? Because I built this with you, Lawrence. Every strategy, every acquisition, every brilliant move that made you famous, half of them were mine. But did you ever share credit? Did you ever say Marcus Webb made this possible? No. I was furniture to you. A tool. An extension of your genius. He stabbed a finger at Kayla, just like her. Just like everyone who wasn't you. You made us invisible. Marcus continued, his voice rising to a shout. So yes, I took what you'd never give. Recognition, power, the chance to be seen. Sterling and I, we were going to build something where I finally mattered, where my name meant something, where I wasn't just Lawrence Matos' shadow. So you destroyed everything, Lawrence said quietly. Because I didn't see you. You destroyed yourself, Marcus spat. You built your empire on blindness, Lawrence. You were so busy being brilliant that you never noticed who was actually keeping your empire running, so I decided to take it. And I would have if she. He glared at Kayla with naked hatred. If a nobody in a maid's uniform hadn't. The executive suite doors burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons drawn, voices commanding Marcus to get on the ground. Agent Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, headed straight for Kayla. Chen Bradley, she said, and there was warmth in her voice. It's good to see you again. Marcus tried to run. He actually tried to flee, scrambling toward the emergency stairs, but agents caught him before he made it 3 steps. As they forced him to his knees, reading him his rights, Lawrence heard him screaming, "You'll never prove it. You need me, Lawrence. Without me, you're nothing. Nothing." Agent Morrison looked at Lawrence. "Mr. Matos, we also have Richard Sterling in custody at his residence. Miss Chen Bradley's evidence was comprehensive. We'll need your full cooperation for the investigation." "You'll have it," Lawrence said. He watched as they hauled Marcus away, still shouting, still raging at his invisibility. And Lawrence understood, finally, what he'd been doing all these years. He'd built an empire by making people disappear. Now that empire had nearly disappeared him. Kayla stood beside him, watching the sunrise break over Manhattan. "It's over," she said softly. "No," Lawrence replied. "I think it's just beginning." The sun rose over Manhattan in shades of gold and amber, painting the 47th floor in light that felt almost sacred after the darkness they'd survived. Lawrence stood at his windows, watching the city wake, and faced a choice that would define everything that came after this moment. His phone had been buzzing for an hour. His PR team, his lawyers, his board members, all of them with the same advice, delivered in increasingly urgent tones. Contain the story, control the narrative. Tell the press it was an external attack, swiftly neutralized by Matos Capital's security team. Mention the arrests of Marcus Webb and Richard Sterling, but frame it as Lawrence's vigilance that caught them. Keep it clean. Keep it simple. Keep Lawrence Matos as the hero of his own story. The old Lawrence would have done exactly that. He'd built his entire life on carefully curated perception, on making sure the world saw only what he wanted them to see. Vulnerability was weakness, admission was defeat, and crediting a black woman in a janitor's uniform as his savior, that was the kind of truth that invited mockery, skepticism, the slow erosion of the image he'd spent 12 years constructing. But the old Lawrence had died somewhere around 1:34 a.m., and the man standing here now understood something he'd never grasped before. The image was the prison. Kayla sat in his conference room, her cleaning uniform folded neatly on the table beside her, wearing clothes borrowed from Lawrence's emergency office wardrobe, a white button-down shirt that was too large for her, and black slacks she'd had to roll at the ankles. She looked small, exhausted, and terrified in a way she hadn't been when facing down $50 billion in ransomware. "You can't tell them about me," she said for the 3rd time. "Lawrence, please. You don't understand what it was like before. The scandal, the media, the way people looked at me like I was a traitor. I can't go through that again." "You're not a traitor," Lawrence said gently. "You were framed. The world doesn't care about the difference. Her hands twisted together in her lap. They'll dig into my past, question my credentials, assume I'm lying or you're lying or we're both running some kind of con. I've been invisible for 6 years because invisible is safe. Please, let me stay that way. Lawrence knelt in front of her chair, meeting her eyes at her level. Kayla, you saved my life tonight. Not just my company, my life. Everything I am, everything I've built, everything I have the chance to become. That's because you stepped out of the shadows. And now you're asking me to push you back into them? I'm asking you to protect me the way I protected you. And I will, Lawrence said. But not by making you invisible again, by standing beside you and making sure the whole world knows your name, by using every resource I have to clear your record and restore what was stolen from you, by refusing to let you believe that you deserve to be hidden. Tears spilled down Kayla's cheeks. What if they destroy you for this? What if your clients leave, your investors pull out, your reputation? Then I'll rebuild with the truth instead of illusions, Lawrence interrupted. And maybe what I build this time will actually be worth something. At 7 a.m., Lawrence Matos walked into a hastily arranged press conference with Kayla Bradley at his side. The room erupted in camera flashes and shouted questions. His PR team looked like they might faint. His lawyers were frantically texting, probably updating their malpractice insurance. Lawrence raised a hand for silence, and the room gradually stilled. He looked out at the sea of faces, reporters, analysts, competitors who'd shown up to watch his downfall, and felt a strange sense of peace. Last night, Matos Capital was the target of a sophisticated cyberattack that should have destroyed everything I've built, he began. The attack was orchestrated by my chief operating officer, Marcus Webb, in partnership with Richard Sterling of Sterling Financial, both of whom are now in FBI custody. By 1:30 a.m., I had lost access to $50 billion in assets and was completely helpless to stop the collapse. The room exploded with questions. Lawrence waited them out. I was saved by this woman, he continued, gesturing to Kayla. Kayla Chen Bradley, who for the past 2 years has been working the night shift as a member of our janitorial staff. What I didn't know, what I never bothered to learn because I never bothered to see her, is that Kayla is a former NSA Level 5 cyberwarfare specialist who stopped the attack in 47 seconds, using skills I couldn't comprehend and courage I didn't deserve. He paused, letting the shock ripple through the room. I walked past this woman 1,000 times without learning her name. She cleaned around me like furniture while I worked, and I never once acknowledged her existence. My arrogance, my blindness, my fundamental failure to value human beings unless they served my ambitions, that's what made Marcus's betrayal possible. That's what nearly destroyed everything. And that's what Kayla had to overcome to save me anyway. Lawrence turned to look at Kayla, who stood rigid with fear and something that might have been hope. Kayla Chen Bradley was forced from her career 6 years ago by a scandal she didn't commit. She's been surviving in invisibility ever since, caring for her disabled sister and hiding talents that should have made her a legend. Instead, she was erased. And I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure the world knows exactly who erased her and why. The questions came like a flood, but Lawrence held up his hand one more time. I'm not here to spin this or control it. I'm here to tell the truth. I was arrogant. I was blind. I built an empire on making people invisible. And when everything collapsed, the person I'd never seen became the only one who could save me. Make of that what you will. The response over the next 72 hours was unlike anything Lawrence could have predicted. Instead of mockery, there was fascination. Kayla's story, the brilliant woman destroyed by false accusations, surviving in the shadows, saving the billionaire who never saw her, captured something in the cultural imagination. The scandal that had ended her career got revisited by investigative journalists, who started asking uncomfortable questions about evidence that had never quite added up, and testimonies that contradicted physical timelines. Then a former NSA analyst came forward anonymously with documents suggesting Kayla had been set up by a superior who'd stolen her work and needed her gone to cover his tracks. The superior had retired years ago, but the documents were explosive. Within a week, the Department of Justice opened an investigation into Kayla's original case. Lawrence's clients, rather than fleeing, stood by him. His vulnerability, his honesty, his willingness to admit failure, it was so unprecedented in their world that it felt revolutionary. "You told the truth when you could have lied," one major investor told him. "That's the kind of integrity we thought died on Wall Street 30 years ago." 3 months later, Lawrence stood before another crowd, but this one felt different. The event was the official launch of the Bradley Foundation, established with $5 billion from Lawrence's personal fortune and dedicated to providing second chances for people destroyed by unjust accusations, particularly women of color in STEM fields. Beside the foundation announcement was the reveal of the Invisible No More Scholarship Program. Full college funding for service workers and their children, with priority given to those pursuing careers they'd abandoned due to circumstance. And there was one more announcement. Lawrence had restructured Matos Capital with a new leadership team, himself as CEO and Kayla Bradley as co-CEO and Chief Security Officer, with equal authority and equal compensation. As the applause died down, Lawrence stepped away from the podium and turned to Kayla, who stood in a tailored navy suit that made her look like the powerhouse she'd always been beneath the uniform. Then, in front of 500 people, cameras broadcasting live, Lawrence Matos knelt. The room went silent. "Kayla Bradley," he said, his voice steady and clear. "You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You saved me when I didn't deserve saving. You were invisible because I chose not to look. I've spent the last 3 months trying to be worthy of what you gave me that night. Trying to open my eyes the way you opened yours." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Kayla's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm asking, will you let me spend the rest of my life making sure the world sees you the way I finally do? Kayla Bradley, will you marry me?" Kayla stood frozen for a moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she reached down, grasped his hands, and pulled him to his feet. "Stand up, Lawrence," she said, her voice breaking. "We see each other now. We're equals. That's all I ever wanted." She kissed him then, and the room erupted in applause and camera flashes. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I'll marry you. But not because you saved me or I saved you, because we saved each other." 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony with Kayla's sister Maya as maid of honor and Agent Morrison among the guests. The DOJ had officially cleared Kayla's name, and the man who'd framed her faced charges of his own. Kayla's NSA credentials had been restored, though she had no interest in returning to that world. The final scene takes place back in Lawrence's office, their office now, on the 1-year anniversary of the night that changed everything. They work side by side, Kayla's desk positioned parallel to Lawrence's, equal partners in every sense. On the wall between their workspaces hangs a photograph, professionally mounted and lit, Kayla in her cleaning uniform, taken from the security footage of that midnight shift, pushing her cart through the executive suite doors. Beneath it, a brass plaque reads, "She was always here. I just needed to open my eyes." Lawrence stands at the windows, watching the sunset paint Manhattan in shades of amber and rose. Kayla joins him, and he takes her hand. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" he asks. "If you'd just kept cleaning and let me fall?" "Every day," Kayla admits. "And every day I'm glad I didn't." "Why did you?" Lawrence turns to face her. "Really? After everything, after I'd never seen you, why save me?" Kayla smiles, that brilliant smile that had been hidden for so long. "Because I saw something in you worth saving. And because someone once told me that we're all invisible until someone chooses to look. I thought maybe if I saved you, you'd finally look. And maybe if you looked at me, you'd start looking at everyone else you'd been missing." "I do now," Lawrence says quietly. "The security guard who nods at me every morning, his name is James, and his daughter just got accepted to Columbia. The woman who delivers our lunch, Rosa, saving money to bring her mother from Ecuador. I see them now, Kayla, because you taught me how, and I see myself again," Kayla says, "because you taught me I was worth seeing." As the sun sets on Manhattan, Lawrence Matos reflects on the truth that changed his life. He thought losing everything would destroy him, but instead it saved him. It stripped away the illusions he'd built and left him with nothing but the truth. And the truth was that he'd never had anything real, not money, not power, not success, until he had nothing left but the willingness to see. Kayla didn't just save his fortune, she saved his soul. And all it took was finally opening his eyes to the woman who'd been there all along, waiting to be seen. The people we walk past every day, the ones we dismiss, ignore, render invisible because they don't fit our narrow definition of important, they might be carrying our salvation in their hands, our redemption, our second chance at becoming human, if only we'd stop long enough to look, if only we'd open our eyes, and finally, truly, see.